5 games and 5 legendary strategists. From Mathiu Silverberg to Shu, Lucretia, Elenor and Apple, the Suikoden series has given us some of the most memorable military minds in JRPG history. But who is actually the best? Today we're ranking all 5 from mediocre to greatest based on their intelligence, battlefield tactics, adaptability, experience, and most of all, what they actually accomplish. And trust me, the top 3 are extremely difficult to separate. Let's begin. At number 5 we've got Apple. And before anyone gets angry that it should be Caesar Silverberg, I have to disagree. Because Apple has been there around the block. She's been in the works now for another war, her third one ongoing. And to me, she is a military strategist who was trained by Mathiu and now is moreover not supporting Caesar as counterpart to Albert, but she has taken over. You can tell. But the problem is that when you put her next to the other 4 people on this list, she is still developing. Apple is essentially the apprentice among masters. In Suikoden I, she's already working with the Liberation Army. In Suikoden II, she becomes part of the new alliance against Highland. And this is where things get particularly interesting, because Apple isn't simply presented as some idiot who comes up with bad plans. The problem, for example, in Suikoden II is that she was fighting an opponent unlike almost anything anyone had faced before in Luca Blight. She can make a sound strategic assessment, and in Luca Blight simply smashed through the assumptions with overwhelming aggression numbers and unpredictability. She's got a lack of experience maybe, but she's learning how to become a strategist while dealing with the human consequences of war. She isn't Mathiu, she isn't Shu, but she definitely has an edge knowing the tactics that the Silverberg family has done. She isn't Lucretia, who appears to know what's happening 3 moves before everyone else. And she's certainly not Elenor, whose military reputation was already legendary. But Apple has something the others don't have quite in the same way: growth. She gets better. She learns from the people around her, and across the series, she becomes a much more capable strategist than her initial reputation might suggest. So why number 5? Because we're ranking mastery and not potential. She is intelligent, she's talented, she's useful, but she always has to share the stage, either with Mathiu, with Shu, or with Caesar. So compared to the other 4, she still seems like the student, even if she's the master now. And that is why Apple takes 5th place. Number 4, Elenor Silverberg. At number 4 we have one of the most underrated strategists in the entire franchise. And honestly, this is the rank that feels the most unfair, because if you only looked at Eleanor's reputation, you'd probably put her much higher. She is a legendary strategist and has military experience from her time serving the Scarlet Moon Empire, and by the time of Suikoden IV, her name already carries enormous weight. She's a veteran and a genius, someone who has already spent years thinking about warfare on a level that most people simply cannot match. And yet, Suikoden IV is the problem. We don't get enough of her. She has been out of active military life for years and carries enormous emotional baggage. She's a heavy drinker and a withdrawer, and by the time the heroes need her, they are effectively trying to bring back the old Elenor. And that means we're consistently hearing about how brilliant she is, but we don't get the number of spectacular demonstrations that Mathiu, Shu, or Lucretia receive. And that's the crucial difference, because Elenor is told to be incredible, but they have more opportunities to show it to us. And while Elenor does get involved, you can see why her reputation exists. She quickly understands the larger strategic situation, works alongside Kika and Lino, and helps organize the resistance against the Kuluk threat. But the scale of the game simply doesn't give her as many legendary moments as some of the other strategists. Not because she's necessarily worse, or less intelligent, or whatever reason, but because the evidence we actually get to judge her on is smaller, and that's a shame. Honestly, I believe Elenor is one of the biggest what-if characters in this ranking. Had we seen at least a flashback at the height of her career in Scarlet Moon, or more interactions in the meantime with Graham Cray, it wouldn't have made the ending between them so worse, finding out that Graham Cray was Elenor Silverberg's apprentice. This list might have looked way different had we seen more of Elenor instead of just her bumping around every few hours of gameplay, and that's about it. That is the very reason why Elenor Silverberg is ranked number 4. At number 3, we have the strategist who might be the most terrifyingly competent person on this entire list, Lucretia Merces. Her reputation is ridiculous. Constantly thinking several steps ahead of everyone else, she seems to know what her enemies are going to do before they actually think about it. And she has an almost absurd number of successful strategies throughout the game. From the army's invasion to the Boros conspiracy to Ra Fleet to the recapture again of the Sulfalena city. Over and over again, Lucretia is put into situations where the odds look terrible and then comes up with a plan that nails it. And this is why fans genuinely argue that she should be number 1. Because if the question is simply which strategist gets the best results, Lucretia has an extremely strong case. She doesn't just survive the impossible, she dismantles it. And some of her plans are brilliantly specific because they exploit circumstances that other people wouldn't even think to use. Her ability to manipulate the situation without necessarily revealing her entire plan is all incredibly impressive. But there's one criticism of Lucretia that comes up and up again, and it's a pretty fair one. She's almost too perfect. She rarely seems surprised by what she's doing or seems genuinely outplayed. She often 2 or 3 steps ahead, and as a result, some fans feel that her intelligence is harder to evaluate. Because we don't always see her struggling with the problem, we see the answer. And that's an important distinction, because Mathiu and Shu often make you think, how the hell did they come up with that? With Lucretia, the reaction is more often, of course she already knew. And that can actually make her feel slightly less impressive as a character, even while making her look more impressive as a strategist. So where does that leave her? Because her accomplishments are enormous, her execution is probably the best on the list. But when we're talking about the combination of all of these factors mentioned earlier on, there are 2 people I'd still put ahead of her, and that leaves Lucretia at number 3. Number 2. This is where things really get difficult, because if you told me that Mathiu Silverberg is the best strategist in Suikoden, I wouldn't argue it very hard. Mathiu is the definition of a military strategist. He has experience, real experience, because he served as a military strategist during the Scarlet Moon Empire's campaigns. He knows what war looks like and what soldiers need. He understands logistics, deception, and morale. But most of all, he understands people. His strategies aren't flashy simply for the sake of being flashy. They're designed to produce results. One of the best examples is the way he handles its internal security. Rather than simply trying to identify a traitor directly, he creates a situation in which a traitor effectively exposes themselves. That's classic Mathiu. Don't fight the problem head on, control the conditions around it, and let the enemy reveal themselves. He also demonstrates some extremely creative battlefield thinking throughout the whole of the Gate Rune War. And this is one of the reasons fans so often put him at number 1. Deception, leadership, psychological insight, and the ability to make decisions where the situation gets ugly. And this last part matters. Mathiu understands something that many fictional strategists don't. Sometimes there is no good answer, and there is only one answer that costs the least. That's one of the central ideas behind this character. He has seen what war does to people, and he's seen what happens when strategic decisions become detached from human consequences. And that makes him more than just a genius. It makes him a strategist who understands the price of strategy. So why isn't he number 1? Because there is one person who does something that is arguably even harder than what everyone else has done. We're gonna get to number 1. Mathiu has a strong claim, Lucretia has a strong claim, but looking at the arguments that fans repeatedly use to defend the best strategist in the series, we keep coming back to Shu. Because Shu does something different. He doesn't calculate the battlefield, He calculates the person across the table. Shu understands that the best way to defeat an intelligent opponent isn't necessarily to outthink them in the way they expect. It's to make them think they're winning and then punish them for it. That's particularly important when we talk about Leon Silverberg, because he isn't some random enemy commander. He is one of the greatest strategic minds in the world of Suikoden, and Shu knows exactly what kind of man he's dealing with. Leon is rational, methodical, predictable, and extremely intelligent, and Shu turns those qualities into weaknesses. He weaponizes Leon's expectations. That's the thing that separates Shu from the other strategists. He loves doing things that his opponent simply doesn't expect. He uses deception, he'll manipulate assumptions, and he'll create situations where his enemy's own intelligence becomes a liability. And that is arguably the highest level of strategy, because there is a difference between I know what you're going to do and I know why you're going to do it. Shu constantly operates on the why level, and that's why fans so often put him at the top when the question is raw intelligence. But there's another important reason he's put above Mathiu. Shu was trained by Mathiu, and he eventually develops a philosophy that is distinctly his own. Mathiu understood war as a complex moral problem. Shu understands war as a problem that must be solved. That doesn't necessarily make Shu a better human being. Just think of the lengths Apple, Ryu, and Konami had to go through to convince him to join. He is an exceptionally dangerous strategist and is willing to think outside the traditional military doctrine. He is willing to gamble and use himself as part of the plan. He is also willing to exploit the psychological expectations of his opponent. And when all of that comes together, he becomes incredibly difficult to beat. So when the question is, who is the smartest strategist? I think Shu deserves the number one spot. Here is the thing. If you disagree with this ranking, you probably aren't actually disagreeing about the characters. You're disagreeing about what makes a strategist the best. If you value experience and overall military competence, it's Mathiu. Successful execution, it's Lucretia. But if you value adaptability, psychological warfare, and the ability to completely surprise an intelligent opponent, Shu is number one. And honestly, that's why this is such a great group of characters to rank. Because unlike a lot of RPG genius strategists, these five actually have very different approaches to strategy. Mathiu is the veteran, Shu is the chess player, Lucretia is the grandmaster, Elenor is a legendary tactician, and Apple is an apprentice turned master, but still in need of help. So now I want to know what you think. Who is the greatest strategist in Suikoden? Is Shu really number one? Should Mathiu take the crown? Lucretia? Maybe even Elenor or Apple? Let me know your ranking in the comments. And if you're a Suikoden fan, subscribe to this channel, AmetystADV, or go to AmetystADV.com for more rankings, Suikoden theories, and deep dives, and also outside of the world of Suikoden in various RPG series. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'll see you in the next one, so make sure your pixels are plentiful and your adventures are prosperous.